I was a middle-aged man in the middle of nowhere, serving drinks to my boss at a company party and trying to keep him in a good mood. I'm turning 32 this year, as my friends and co-workers get married one by one. There hasn't been a hint of romance in my life. I know just waiting won't lead to any romantic encounters, but there's someone I can't seem to forget, which is likely why I don't feel compelled to actively seek a partner. Once my boss's lengthy monologue finally concluded, I excused myself to the restroom. I thought I might step outside and get a breath of fresh air, just to space out a bit. And as I was wandering down the hallway of the bar, I bumped into her, the person I would never forget. My high school sweetheart. She has a more mature vibe now, but it was definitely Susan. She seemed to have noticed me too, and stopped in the middle of the hallway. Jack. She called my name, then fell silent. It's been a while. I'm here having drinks with my boss. We hadn't been in touch for over a decade since our falling out, so I wasn't sure how to interact with her. I'm here for dinner with friends. Despite this unexpected reunion, that was all the conversation we managed to have. We parted ways with a simple "well then." Susan and I dated since high school, and our relationship continued even as we attended different colleges. But we broke up over a fight during our job hunting phase. I was the one to blame. Susan, a brilliant and beautiful woman, was attending a prestigious university. She secured a job relatively early. However, I was the complete opposite. I attended a mediocre college and had a hard time finding a job during my senior year. I grew frustrated as I still couldn't land a job. It would have been bearable if that was it, but I was jealous of Susan. Despite her trying to support me and consider my feelings, I back then felt pitiful, as if being pitied. I lashed out at her with harsh words like, "You wouldn't understand how I feel. You're probably looking down on me. And stop acting like a goody two-shoes, making a fool out of me." I even said something far worse. It was only natural that she eventually got fed up with me. After parting with Susan, I managed to secure a job at my current company, but there was no more communication between Susan and me. In my 20s, I learned from a high school classmate that Susan got married and moved to Chicago due to her husband's job transfer. I had mixed feelings, but also felt relieved. As long as she was happy somewhere, that was good enough for me. After hearing about her marriage, I thought it was about time for me to move on as well. So I did. I went on a few blind dates, but I never really met anyone suitable. And that brings us to now. About a week after running into Susan at the bar, I was visiting my favourite cafe after work. I enjoyed buying coffee beans from this place and brewing coffee at home on my days off. I developed a love for coffee back in college. Now I've become so particular about selecting beans and how I grind them. As I entered the cafe, eager for a new batch of beans, there was Susan enjoying a cake set. This was our second encounter. "We meet again," I murmured, surprised at the unexpected coincidence. "Really? Are you alone?" I briefly explained that I often come here to buy coffee beans. "What about you? Are you alone? Isn't your husband waiting at home? I didn't even know you were back from Chicago." And my words, Susan lowered her eyes, and she opened her mouth, putting on a forced smile. "My husband passed away 4 years ago. I've been living in Chicago since then. I've only recently moved back here." "I see. I'm sorry. That was thoughtless of me. I didn't know her husband had passed away. I thought she was still building a happy home." After that, our conversation didn't continue, and we said, "See you," and parted again. Susan, who lost her husband and lives alone in San Francisco. I want to talk to her more. I want to get closer to her. But I don't feel I have the right because I hurt her with my harsh words at the end of our relationship. About a month later, on a night of a terrible typhoon, I had my third encounter with my widow ex-girlfriend, Susan. My apartment is beyond the station, so I passed by the station on my way home from work. The station was crowded with people. The trains were stopped or delayed. In the midst of all this, I found Susan on the phone, taking shelter from the rain. Susan also noticed me immediately and called out to me. Amazing, we met again. Yeah, is the train stopped? When I asked, Susan nodded with a bitter smile. It stopped. I don't know when it'll start moving again. But both the buses and taxis are crowded with people, so it doesn't look like I'll be able to get on. I just tried calling a nearby hotel, but it's no good. It's hard to find a place that's open, even when it's not a typhoon. This station is busy, so I guess that's inevitable. But when I glanced at Susan, her clothes and hair were wet. Even though it's early spring, the nights are chilly. I handed her a handkerchief. Use this. You must be cold. Oh, thank you. I had an umbrella, but the rain and wind were so strong. When I found Susan, the rain and wind had just come down. But before that, both the rain and the wind had been terrible, and the sky looked like it was going to start pouring again soon. I couldn't just leave Susan, who had no way to get home or a hotel to stay in. Do you want to come to my place? The words naturally slipped out of my mouth, but I immediately regretted them. There's no way she'd want to come to the home of her ex-boyfriend, who she always fought with. That's what I thought. But Susan's response was unexpected. You're willing to let me stay? When I looked at Susan, she looked up at me with moist eyes. I felt nervous looking into the eyes of her, who had become more mature, but those eyes seemed to be asking me for help. Sure, come on. At my words, Susan smiled softly and seemed relieved, and so Susan came to stay at my apartment. When we got home, I had Susan, who was probably cold from getting wet, take a bath. Seeing Susan with her wet hair after the bath, wearing my clothes as a change of pyjamas, made my heart race. But I had no ulterior motive in inviting her, so I tried to hide it. After drying her hair, Susan said, I'd like some coffee. Could you brew it for me? I've been missing it for a while. There was a bag of coffee beans and a grinder where Susan was looking. I used to make coffee for her frequently when we were in college and dating. Sure, I replied. I ground the beans carefully just for Susan. She was watching me so attentively that I asked, Do you want to try grinding the beans? At first Susan nodded, but then she hesitated and said, Actually, I'll pass. I want you to do it, Jack. I've missed your coffee, she said. Even if her words were just courtesy, they made me happy. As the coffee was almost ready, I asked her how she wanted it. Do you want it as a café au lait? Yes, you remember that, she said. Susan couldn't drink black coffee when we were dating. I always made it into café au lait by adding milk for her. I still remember it. Well, of course, I remember it, I said, offering Susan the freshly made café au lait. Susan took the mug from me with both hands and carefully brought it to her lips. Ah, it's delicious. The aroma is soothing. I've missed this. I've missed your café au lait. After we broke up, I've been wanting to drink it for over 10 years. I've been holding back for more than 10 years. The phrase more than 10 years seemed to have significant weight. I poured my own coffee too. Like in my college days, and even now, I prefer it black. Drinking my own brewed coffee is my daily routine. But today's coffee, which I shared with Susan, tasted even better than usual. After finishing our coffee, we discussed where we were going to sleep, jokingly. I only have one bed. Is it okay if we sleep together? I wanted Susan, who seemed to feel guilty for staying over, to at least smile. I figured she'd retort with something like, "No, it's not okay," since she's got a vibe like that. But her reply was okay, stun. I looked at Susan, who was looking at me with a serious expression. "I've been lonely since my husband passed away," she said. I couldn't help but feel an urge to hug Susan, but I knew this didn't mean she had feelings for me. Susan has been spending lonely nights since her husband's death. Today, perhaps due to the stormy weather, her loneliness had just erupted. I thought if she spent the night in the same room, more bed with me, she'd regret it. And not just Susan, I might regret letting the mood carry me away, even though I care about her. So, I thought there was only one thing I could do. "Susan, I'm sorry for my inappropriate joke. You can sleep on the bed. I'll sleep on the living room couch. I don't want you to regret anything because of your current feelings," I said. Maybe Susan had anticipated what I was going to say. Susan nodded without arguing or saying anything. "No, you're right. I'm sorry," she said. It seemed Susan agreed, which relieved me. Even though I decided not to get swept away, considering that this might be the last time I saw Susan, I thought I should apologize for something I had wanted to apologize for a long time. "Susan, I'm sorry about when we broke up." "When did we broke up? Do you mean the argument we had?" I found myself rethinking whether I could call what happened an argument. From the moment we started dating until we broke up, I never saw a single fault in Susan. When we were in high school, I once asked her why she would even consider dating a guy like me. Back then, just like now, I was a pretty ordinary guy, mediocre at academics and sports. In contrast, Susan was rumoured to be adorable, an honour student, popular with teachers, and highly academic. I just couldn't see what balanced out between us. But as it turns out, Susan and I did not meet for the first time in high school. Apparently, we were in the same class in kindergarten, a fact I had forgotten. I'm told I protected Susan back then when she was being bullied. From that point on, I was considered a hero in Susan's eyes. Susan moved away when we were in senior kindergarten, but she told me that she never forgot about me. I had no recollection of doing anything so admirable. I vaguely remember helping a girl back then, but I feel like I was just trying to show off being a little kindergartner. Susan recounted the story of our kindergarten days several times after we started dating. I used to find it cute that she remembered such things. But by the time I was job hunting, I was sick of hearing it because it just wasn't possible for a pathetic guy like me, who couldn't even secure a job, to be a hero. That was when I had just been rejected by the 10th company. I was feeling the bitter truth of how much your alma mater matters in job hunting. With no job offers coming my way, I felt like I was being denied as a person. Susan, who had already secured a job, was trying to encourage me, but I was so immature at that time. I found Susan's kindness annoying. So, I told her, "Shut up. Everything is so perfect for you, Susan. You've always been a top student, got into a good college, found a job right away. You don't know what it feels like to be a failure like me." Susan's eyes were welling up with tears. "Don't talk like that about yourself, Jack. You're my hero, but I was even frustrated with my job search. And my frustration was maxed out when she told me this story. I'm tired of hearing that story. I don't know. I can't remember stuff from kindergarten. Stop imposing your ideals on me. I'm not your hero. In fact, I don't want to hear your pointless stories anymore. You're annoying me." I still can't forget the look on Susan's face when I said that. It hurt that day. I told her to go away, and she left, her shoulders drooping. After that, I ignored Susan, who kept apologizing. I just wanted her to leave me alone. Then one day she told me over the phone, "Let's break up." It was only natural, considering the awful things I had said. All I think I said was, "I understand." As I was reminiscing, Susan's voice brought me back to reality. She was laughing at my apology, a decade late. "No, it's okay. It's not all your fault, you know," she said. "Looking back, I think I should have stood back and watched over you a little more. I was young, and I just thought I had to be there for you, that I had to say something to encourage you. I think that just put more pressure on you and made you more irate. Maybe we were just too young, both of us." I was happy at Susan's kindness, saying that, even though I was the one to blame, "But you know, when we meet again in high school after being apart since kindergarten, I really thought it was destiny. But I guess it wasn't. We really can't be together, can we?" I had nothing to say to that. That day, we slept in separate rooms, and when I woke up the next day, Susan was gone from my apartment. The room without Susan felt cold, as if the temperature had dropped. That's when I spotted a note from Susan on the table. "If we meet again, I hope we can be together." I saw that and ran out of the house. Surprisingly, I caught up with Susan quickly. As I ran towards the station, she was walking slowly, her eyes swollen from crying. I moved to stand in front of Susan and took her hand. I squeezed her slightly cold hand warmly before expressing my feelings. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'd regret it if I let things slide yesterday, but that was just an excuse. The truth is, I've always loved you, and I still do. I was just being a coward yesterday. I was scared. I had hurt you once, and I wondered if I could make you happy again. I also thought I definitely couldn't beat your deceased husband. I was thinking if it was okay for me, if I had the right to say I wanted to be by your side. I was scared and couldn't say anything." Susan's handwriting on the note was shaky. I thought she must have written it while crying, and my chest tightened. So I started running. "Susan, you said our reunion in high school was destiny. I feel the same way. I think our reunion here as adults is destiny. I won't hurt you anymore. I'll cherish you in my own way, without comparing myself to anyone else. So, I want to be with you. Please, give me another chance. Will you date me?" After I finished speaking, I felt somewhat embarrassed. I mean, a guy over 30 talking about destiny. But it seemed Susan felt the same way. She chuckled and said, "Sometimes you can be such a romantic, Jack. But I love that about you." Susan and I smiled and made eye contact. "Do you want to go back to my place again? I'll make you a delicious cup of coffee. Of course, I'll make yours a latte. Let's talk about the past and the future." "That sounds good. I have a lot of things I want to talk about too." We then walked hand in hand back to my place. Since then, Susan and I have been dating smoothly, and tomorrow, after about a year, we are getting married. Today, we came to visit the grave of Susan's previous husband. This is not the first time I've come to visit his grave with Susan. Before I confessed to Susan, I was pessimistic about whether I could make her happy like her previous husband did. But I realized it's not about comparing. The fact that her husband cherished Susan, I accept that. And I decided to cherish Susan in my own way. That's why I visited the grave, that I wanted him to rest easy. I'll protect Susan's smile. When Susan asked what I was thinking about when I was paying respects, I kept it a secret. It's a secret conversation between men that I can't tell Susan. Susan was smiling, saying, "I'm curious," but she seemed rather happy. After visiting the grave, we returned to our new home, our own home, to live together. When I was about to make coffee, Susan said she preferred juice. She usually doesn't say things like that, so I was worried and asked if she was feeling unwell. But seeing me flustered, Susan grinned. Then she placed a hand on her stomach and said, "I'll have to pass on the latte for a while. The caffeine might startle this little one." As I realized what her words meant, I couldn't help but yell out in joy. I held Susan in my arms. Our baby is due in 7 months. I can't wait for this new chapter of our lives. So, how did you like our story? Your subscription to our channel greatly motivates us to create more content. Looking forward to seeing you in the next video.